Hello and welcome to an episode of From Here to There. Today's alum is Adam Dougherty. Hello, Adam. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Um, what I'd like to start out with is recognizing that everybody's creative journey is their own, and this particular episode is all about you and your journey. So the first question that I have for you is way back, even before you came to the STAM school. What was the journey? What made you decide to come to the STAM School of Art and Design?
Well, first off, hi, John. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm more than happy to have this conversation and speak with Michigan students and alumni and kind of share our journeys and everything. So thanks for having me be a part of this. As for your question as to how did I make my way to stamps, I was always the artist of my class through middle school and high school. So I kind of knew at the very beginning of my college application process that I wanted to go to an art school. So I didn't have any particular school or region of the country I was aiming for. So I applied all over the place and had a whole bunch of backups. And it wasn't late into the process that I considered Michigan. I'm from a family in the Philadelphia area, and in a family where my dad went to Notre Dame, my older brother went to Notre Dame, and my younger brother went to Notre Dame. I'm the middle child with an artistic touch who ended up wanting to go to art school and not be a lawyer. So there wasn't really anyone in my family that had an experience or a career in the creative field. So I didn't really have any family experience or understanding of where to look or what to look for. It wasn't until Michigan came to Philadelphia for a portfolio review for potential applicants that I got a really good reception, had a great conversation, and I was really excited with the aspect that a really big school like Michigan had a great art program and was interested in me. So that was kind of like my beginning process. I did know I wanted to be a graphic designer. I did know I wanted to be in the art school from the beginning. So luckily, when I was applying, I knew I would start doing art classes in art school from the start. But it was really that portfolio review and the discussions with the application team afterward that really got me excited about Michigan and kind of made it a pretty straightforward process through my application and admittance getting into the stamps program.
Yeah. And what year did you graduate?
Freshman year was 2001, so I graduated in 2005.
So you were here for the transition of curriculum.
Yes.
So you started out in a program that specifically had a graphic design major, but then as you were progressing, having majors was being phased out. How did that affect you?
Well, I mean, as I understood it, I believe my class was the last class of the old graphic major program,
Yeah, yeah,
which I was very lucky for because I knew I wanted to do that from the start. And other than prerequisites, which we already knew as part of the program, I had the faster track into the classes that I knew I wanted to do. So I wasn't overly familiar with what the class behind me had differently in terms of curriculum.
yeah,
But kind of what I heard from people at that point was people from the grade below me wanted the projection that I was on, and in some cases, vice versa as well. But it did kind of feel like, people in overlapping classes and in the stamp school at the same time were in the same school, but with different majors.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think it was confusing at some points, but I do remember mostly in best detail that I was pretty relieved that I made it into the last class that had the design focused major, and that I was pretty happy being in that.
Yeah, so, and I think that the newer curriculum has evolved to the point where even though we don't have official majors, we have trajectories and things that people can really focus on. And I know that even before that curricular change, you needed to, for lack of a better word, dabble in other media. You know, you had to take drawing courses, you had to take a 3D course for sure. When you think about the studio courses you took that were not directly related to your major, do you think they influenced your creativity?
I definitely think so. If anything, I was able to garner more skills from different areas and apply it to my major. I mean, looking back, I'm glad I didn't take graphic design courses from the beginning. I think I was probably the minority of students that came into the school without a very strong knowledge or experience with Adobe Suite. So I was kind of learning Photoshop and Illustrator as I was taking classes.
Yeah.
But the prerequisite classes, the drawing, mechanical drawing, I took some metalworking classes, some pottery classes. I think those were all really great as well because it did give me the larger perspective of experiences and ways of working with my hands that I didn't get in my high school program. I think it gave me not only a greater appreciation for those areas, but then also kind of gave me particular ideas of or way of thought or concept generation that I probably wouldn't have had in other places. Because if I kind of remember, my graphic design courses kind of hit the ground running
Yeah.
in terms of building work and not so much experiencing or building a library of resources or inspiration. And I feel like that's what my prerequisite freshman year classes really helped me out with.
Yeah. Yeah. You learned how to do it for yourself.
Absolutely. And I can say I never would have thought taking a metalworking class would have been something I would have enjoyed. But I can remember that was a really fun class freshman year. And I'm really glad I did that because it's one of those things that, you know, other than college, you never would have had the opportunity or know how to take. So
Yeah.
that was
Sticking with this idea of looking back and like, whoa, I actually like that. Um, are there moments at the either the stamp school or the university as a whole that you know you look back on and just go, wow, that was a great moment for me?
I mean, I loved my 4 years at Michigan. And I think I had a big advantage on a lot of my friends by knowing what I wanted my major to be starting freshman year. But I guess my overall specific experience that I really loved was that I did a summer semester abroad in Florence. And that was specifically a drawing and learning Italian curriculum in that program. So I believe at the time it was a shared program with the University of Wisconsin, and it was run out of a villa just outside of Florence.
Was that Lou Marinaro?
I'd have to look back.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
is that the name of the villa you're saying?
No, no, no,
Or
no, no. Lou would have been the faculty person.
yeah, Lou's not. I'd have to look back at the
Yeah.
faculty, but that name specifically is not ringing a bell. So it could have been, but I'd have to look back at it.
Yeah. So what was it like to be in a place like Florence? Um, you know, that was, you know, just really remarkable that makes you remember it so well.
I mean, being in Florence, oh, I guess I forgot there's a lot of art history curriculum in there as well. I think that part was fantastic to be in a class in Florence talking about sculpture and painting and the Renaissance right in front of the actual artworks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember those classes were taught by professors who also had an artistic background themselves. So we didn't just talk about, you know, the dates and the artists and its reception and its history, but also the work, the artistic inspiration and styles that were put into it. With the focus that I would then take my drawing classes and apply that work into, you know, being around Florence and drawing and illustrating. And that was a good opportunity to kind of learn from that and see it in person. I
Yeah.
think it's a huge difference seeing stuff in person rather than in the books. But then also it's hard to not be inspired when you're in places like Florence during the summertime.
Yeah, for sure. Again, sticking with experiences that can come full circle. When you look at your own sort of career trajectory, do you have any of those sort of full circle aha moments where you learned something when you were a student and thought to yourself, oh my God, I'm never going to use this. And then 5, 10 years later, you're like, I'm using this.
I have a very specific one. And I think it was my graphic design class, either junior or senior year. So I don't know what level. But there was a part of the curriculum where we learned how to assemble books for portfolios. And I can't remember the style specifically, but it was not to use like the Kinko's spiral binding or to use anything like that, but to construct a book by hand through glue and paper, which was a really arduous process, and it was a big project that focused more on the construction of the book rather than our own work inside it. And it was kind of focused on building a physical portfolio for yourself. And at the time, I can remember I didn't do a great job at it, but doing that book assembly project really actually helped me out in my application to Under Armour. Because I can recall I initially applied over the internet for the assistant job that I started with, and I didn't hear back for a couple of weeks. So I assumed maybe my resume didn't make it in and wasn't considered. So probably the young side of me thought it was time to take it to the extreme, because I knew I wanted to work at Under Armour and I was really excited about it. So I used those processes to build 2 physical printed versions of my portfolio. And I used everything I learned from that class. And I mailed one to the HR hiring department. And then I don't know whether it was a good idea or not, but I also then used the internet to find the mailing address of Kevin Plank, who is the CEO and founder of Under Armour. And I mailed the other copy directly to what I found was his personal home address.
Not too stocky.
Yeah, maybe a little stalking. I thought maybe it would at least show a little ambition.
Yeah, sure.
Not surprisingly, after I mailed those 2 out, like no less than 5 days later, I had an interview to come to Baltimore for an in-person interview for the position.
I love this. Yeah.
So I didn't hear anything from anyone specifically about receiving those printed versions, but I do think with the speedy response since I mailed them out, I think it actually did make a difference and really got me that in-person interview.
I love this. Yeah. So what was your first job out of college?
So outside of college, my first job was point of purchase display sales in North New Jersey for a company called Rock 10, which I think has been renamed since then. I don't know what it is now, but it's a pretty large and significant company that designs and builds point of purchase displays, either with molded plastic or corrugate board. And they're pretty prominent. They still have some pretty big accounts. And I think you can basically see them in any kind of those pallet displays or in aisle displays that you see at CVS and Costco's and BJ's. We had a lot of pharmaceuticals through that as well. So I can kind of remember Mars Candy and Novartis and Wyatt as being our really big accounts. So I was basically in there as a graphic designer to build presentations to sell the design of these displays to these larger companies. And then we were also the pre-production designers who would receive branding suite packages from these companies and then build the packages using their artwork and branding, and then send them off to the printer for mass production and delivery.
How did you get that job?
So that job was actually through a far extended family connection that I didn't realize we had, because it's such a large company and it's a friend of the family who worked for this company that I didn't realize they had an art department. So luckily, I was working an internship in Ann Arbor after graduation. And I was able to hear about that, and I was able to comfortably go through the hiring process in Ann Arbor with an internship. So I believe getting that job was probably a summer-long process.
Yeah.
I was luckily able to already be in an internship and be comfortable and not have to stretch too far in order to go through that interview process and land the job.
So do you remember what your starting salary was?
No, I don't. Um, I could go find that. I'm not sure how to find that, but I can find it. But
No,
I
no,
do
no.
know.
What I'm more curious about is, did you negotiate for a salary? No.
No.
Was the salary like what you expected it to be? Was it less than you expected it to be? More than you expected it to be?
I mean, it was like a bottom starting position. So I was an assistant graphic designer at my first job. So I didn't really have any high expectations for the salary amount because I knew I was starting. It was my first job out of school, and I basically had to cut my teeth.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think the taxes that they take out was my only real surprise. But I think I kind of remember, I knew it was kind of a fair amount, and I was really just getting my foot in the door.
Yeah.
So I think I was happy to have a paying job. So I knew I was going to climb the ladder, and I was going to be ambitious enough to eventually get a promotion. But I don't think I was overly too shocked about what an assistant graphic designer was earning at that point.
Yeah. Um, and as your career progressed, and we'll talk a little bit more about, from one place to the next place. Have you become someone comfortable negotiating salary?
Yeah, I think it's a skill I've been using lately. My degree of success, I'm not really sure of, but I know I've been through some negotiating processes here specifically at Under Armour because it is a big running machine that you have to kind of work your way into and find your place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my negotiations have not been all of that involved. Um, it's just basically working hard and making sure your superiors are aware of your accomplishments that I've really focused most of my energy on.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So we have you stamped School of Art Design student, internship in Ann Arbor to bridge whatever comes next. First job out of college, kind of like, okay, not a huge amount of creativity. They're telling me what to do and I put it together.
Mhm.
um, what came next? What happened after that?
Um, so I mean, first off, about my first job, I did learn a lot on that process. Not only did I really get to expand my use and abilities with Adobe Suite by using it in the working area, but that job also introduced me to some 3D rendering programs, Strata 3DX, I think it was, which I became very proficient at, and that helped me build my portfolio, and then also allowed me to build some really interesting work for the promotional sales part of that job. But after that job was my application to Under Armour,
Oh,
and I've been here ever since. So my professional career is not all of that complicated since graduation.
so interesting. When you got the first position that you had at Under Armour, this was the story of the book, right? That you mailed to get that foot in the door. And what was the first thing that you were doing there?
So I started in what's called the inline department. So basically, that's the design department within Under Armour where we design and sell Under Armour branded apparel. And those are obviously through all the different sports specific categories. So when I first came in as an assistant, I was designing the graphic packages for Under Armour's inline football, baseball, and run categories. Now, basically mean graphic T-shirts, branding, prints, placed prints throughout the entire inline collection. And then those would be the Under Armour branded pieces that would be sold through Under Armour stores, through Dick's Sporting Goods, and any of our pad partners.
Yeah.
Um, so it was not uniform related at all. It was really just more the activewear
Right.
that I was originally hired to do.
Yeah. And then what came next?
So I was in that position, I think 5 years total. So I believe I got up to a almost a senior graphic designer position, and expanded the number of categories I worked on. But we worked alongside, or at least in the same space as the team sports department, and that's the department that does all of our uniforms. Um, I think at that point, I learned that there was an opening in the team sports department, and I had to go through an interview process for that as well. So basically, I put together a portfolio of my Under Armour work. I had a few interviews with people on the team. And then that transitioned me over to the team sports department, where I've been ever since. And that kind of escalated from a senior graphic designer to a graphic design manager, where I am now, where I really started as maybe as a production designer, like building technical packages and prepping artwork for production, and kind of built myself up through working on graphic t-shirts, working on sideline collections, and then getting to the point where I got to lead designs of the uniforms going on field for our collegiate properties. And I think at this point, I'm now kind of at the maybe you could consider the top point of our department, which is design of the football uniforms, because that's probably the more prominent and visually viewed aspect of our department. So right now, that's really focusing on NCAA uniforms and getting into our XFL uniforms as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so as you look back, and I'm wondering, whether it's applying for an internship, applying for a job, even this great example of I had to interview, even though I already work for the company, to go from one position to the next. What kind of advice do you have for students about what sort of things are more successful, more effective around internship and job searching and application?
I think I'd honestly have to say there are a lot more tools available to people now than were back when I was job searching. So that was around 2015, between Rockton and Under Armour. So now there's LinkedIn, that's much more prominent, and a lot more headhunters use that. And there's Behance, which is Adobe's portfolio service, both of which I always try to keep up to date. I think those are two tools that I rely on a lot, and that I would recommend that people make sure to update that as you go. Because if an opportunity comes up and you have to update stuff like within a week's amount of time, but you still have to do your full-time job, then you're not going to get everything that you want on there, or you're not going to get everything that you feel like showcases you or your work well enough. But if you cut that out over a span of time and you update it little bits as you go, it's not only a tool for your next step, but it's also a good tool for you to use at your current job for anything like your mid-year reviews, or your end-of-year reviews, or if you're, like you said, applying to get into another position within the company that you're at. It's good to have all that information properly recorded and ready to go, because when an opportunity comes up, you're not going to know with any time to spare. So it's always good to have those tools updated and ready
Yeah.
at the drop of a hat.
So when you were a student at U of M, did you take advantage of the career-related resources?
I did take advantage of a lot of people who came in as speakers. And I did go a lot to the portfolio reviews, because I remember a lot of small companies would come in and look at portfolios and think about hiring and talking to people. I think I probably learned the most from those portfolio reviews, because I did get a lot of rejections from those through my freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And granted, I still had a lot to learn because I was kind of behind the ball on learning Adobe programs. But those rejections did teach me what I should be focusing on, what my weaknesses were, and what I can and should improve on. And also kind of gave me a judgment as to what I should be ready for by senior year, when I'm actually applying to more than just internships, but full-time jobs.
I'm wondering, because I actually do work with students who have an interest both in, visual design and athletics, who would, I think, be very interested in interning at Under Armour, or, if they're seniors, getting a job at Under Armour. From your vantage point, what advice would you give them in terms of trying to get a foot in the door at Under Armour?
Sure. Well, for what I look for when we're looking for new designers, we're always open to find talent from new areas and new niches. So if you have a mostly creative background, I don't think ever count yourself out for that stuff. I'd say apply for it anyway and see what skills you have that apply. But I think it is important to try to have work that showcases your talents within that particular area that you're applying for. So if you're applying, say, for my department and you want to do uniforms, even if you don't have jobs in the past that have allowed you to design anything sports related, I think it's important to assign yourself particular projects that show your skills within that certain set. Because we are not only looking for people that are creative, that can keep up, that can do the job, but we're also looking to hire people that can hit the ground running as soon as they start. So if we have somebody that's overly creative, but has never really done much branding or design work within our field, then we're going to have trouble trusting this new person to be able to come in and start work right away. Because you got to expect that hiring is not only, companies will not only hire to grow departments, but also hire to replace people as quickly as possible. So if somebody leaves and those departments are like a skeleton crew, and they need a new person right away, they're not going to go through the very long process to find the right person. They're in some cases going to find somebody who is the best candidate and can start work right away and fill in that vacuum as quickly as possible so that the team can get back up to full strength.
As you're talking about this, it occurs to me that what you also might be describing is someone who can learn quickly on the job.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So learning quickly is a huge advantage, and showing that through your portfolio more than anything else, I think makes the biggest impact.
Yeah.
Especially people in the creative field. I mean, after a while, resumes all look the same, but it's the portfolios that really stand out and help us streamline through to the right people, or people that we feel like we need to learn more about and have a follow-up interview with.
Yeah, I love that. When you think about the culture at Under Armour, what are the words that immediately come to mind?
So the culture, I would say very corporate, because there's a very strong balance and push and pull between the business department and the art department. You do have to kind of figure out a particular language and vocabulary to bridge that gap. You have to learn to not only speak and understand, present, and speak into the design part of the process, but you have to learn how to communicate that to the business side.
Yeah.
Especially in my department, when I design something, I not only have to sell the idea into my leadership within Under Armour, who then has to build a business plan around it. But the last stages, I have to present them to equipment managers and head coaches and athletic department VPs and heads of departments, who I don't expect to have creative backgrounds. You do have to speak to it so that they can understand what you're presenting, what it brings to the table for them, and what boxes it checks in their expectations, and how we as professionals in this space anticipate the public and the athletes and the consumers to take away and to understand and to absorb these designs when they hit the field, when they hit the the internet, the world, Dick's Sporting Goods, the book departments, the bookstores. You know, when it finally gets out there, we have to have an understanding of how we like it, but then how the public is going to receive it as well.
Yeah, I love what you're describing here, the ability for designers to speak other people's language and not expect the other people to necessarily speak design.
Right.
That I think this is such a great example of something that, you know, you can't really learn in a classroom, that you have to be out in the world and experience. And so this is great. I'm wondering if you, because that was great advice. I'm wondering if you have like other advice that you think would be important to share.
So I guess maybe another kind of point to what I was saying earlier is you do have to understand that at school, when you have critiques, those critiques are with your professors who have a creative background and have creative feedback. It's really more in the working world that, again, you're going to have more of the business-minded, non-creative people that you have to sell into. So I think, like you were saying, it's more in the real world that you do need to focus on understanding, bridging those gaps and speaking to people outside of kind of our community. But I think the other things to do is to really work on presentation. I was not good at presentations when I started at Under Armour because I would have to present my work and explain it to very high levels, up to the VP levels within Under Armour, to sell in these designs. And I was not good at that. So I think presenting your work, presenting yourself, I think is something really worth investing your time into. And I would say in your critiques or in your internships, find opportunities to put yourself in front of a crowd or an audience and use that time to kind of cut your teeth and really understand how to present your work to large audiences. Because there are lots of people who do not know how to do that, and I don't think their careers go as far. But people who do, I think, really excel and really get far in their careers. And their ability to cross those lines and to have no problems and have the confidence to speak outside of the creative departments about their work, I think really do the best.
Yeah, I will take this moment to plug a workshop on November 3rd, which is portfolio prep and presentation, which gives students the opportunity to show their work and talk about their work and get feedback from STAMPS alums. You know, so I definitely take it to heart that you need these opportunities to practice. You need these opportunities to get critical feedback. You know, and just not something, again, I think that we can address completely in a classroom, but co-curricularly, we can definitely do some great stuff there. What I would love to know is if there's anything else as you look back, not just on, you know, your experience at the STEM school, but your experiences after you graduate. Is there anything else that you want to share with students that you think would be helpful?
I mean, I think I might be repeating myself, but I think the class that you just brought up, I think would be really important. I think learning how to take critical feedback, but then respond to it professionally is a really big deal. And I think, kind of as I was saying before, keeping your resume and portfolio up to date all the time is a very important thing. And knowing how to speak into and explain yourself to any audience of any size is really important.
Yeah, I love this. So we're going to take a minute now. If anybody has any questions for Adam, we'll give you a minute to drop them in the chat, or if you would like to turn your audio on and simply ask the question, that's fine too. So we'll just take a minute for that.
By the way, John, I love the goatee now.
Oh, thank
Great.
you. And that was a recent addition, like the last 2 months.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So Lindsay, yeah, you have a question.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you could describe a little more about what a typical day in your life is like at Under Armour.
So a typical day today. Um, let's see. I'll try to figure out what my busier days are. Well, maybe I could put it into a week and probably have a greater understanding. So within a week, we are constantly juggling multiple calendars of product throughout the year. And that's the calendars when certain sports begin and start, and then when their product is delivered to equipment managers. So I could kind of say at this point, and also to kind of outline, let you know, we work 18 months in advance. And that's enough time to not only design these garments, but then get them, see protos, do wear tests, do feasibility, and then have everything approved by schools for mass production, and then give the opportunity for those produced pieces to make it to campus so that equipment staffs can prep them for the season. For example, right now, I'm working on football designs for 2024, lacrosse designs, baseball designs, and softball designs for 2026. So I'm kind of working on all three of those departments at different stages right now. And that's within each of those categories that are kind of overlapping. I'm continuously in a process of designing work, setting them up in presentations, and then presenting them to certain levels of leadership, whether it be my immediate creative leadership or the sales or the sports marketing teams that speak to our schools or the school athletic departments. And that's kind of a cycle that we kind of go through as we get closer and closer to final approvals and sign-offs for production. So I'm constantly at work designing stuff, designing those garments, designing those graphics, branding and color stories that are specific to schools or teams, working them into presentations, and kind of organizing all of that so any audience can kind of look at it and understand it, and then taking those and sharing them with my leadership partners to get approval, to get understanding, and make sure we can move to next steps within that process. So there's no shortage of work, but I think it's a big part of kind of managing your time between the actual design process and the sharing process, the approval process, and I guess within that, the editing process as well. When after you get all that feedback, you need to then go back into work and make any edits or changes, updates, or additional ideas should they be needed. And then get that back into the cycle and continue with the calendar to make sure you can hit your dates in terms of getting stuff ready for internal leadership to sign off, getting stuff ready for external partners to see and approve designs, and then get everything ready and packaged up to hand off to factories for production.
Wow. You have quite a week every week.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun job, but it's still a job.
Yeah. We have two questions in the chat for you. The first one, can you talk about a challenge you faced more on the business side of working at Under Armour?
Business side. We have been, I think being a graphic manager has had more of the business side because you need to manage individuals, not just artwork. So managing people has been a challenge, and I think that's a challenge regardless of your industry or your responsibilities. So when you get up to the management level, you do have to learn a lot more, lot more additional skills of managing individuals, working out the progress of their careers, and then managing their workload to make sure it's done on time, it's done appropriately, and it's done to the quality that's expected. But other than that, I think the other main challenge is kind of what we've touched on before, and that's presenting work and selling in work to external partners without the creative background or experience. So sometimes that communication can be difficult to streamline, and sometimes those conversations can span on for multiple weeks if redesigns are needed, if there's any conversations about how much something costs, or if we run into any of the production problems that we've had since the pandemic. So we've had production problems with China, with certain areas in the Middle East, with South America, and they all have their own different problems or delays or timings or capabilities that you have to juggle. And sometimes that either means you have to adjust your artwork due to production problems, or you have to adjust the calendars that you work within and all of your dates and gates so that your external partners are able to keep up and deliver at certain points that might be due to certain complications or shortcomings that have nothing to do with you or your designs. It's just kind of within the sourcing and delivery and production problems that are just kind of part of the process.
Wow, thank you. The next question, which design software would you say that you use most in your day-to-day design work?
So it's Illustrator, mostly because we have to illustrate all of these designs very cleanly and easy to see. So if it's like a football jersey, you have to make it easy to look at a sketch and understand where all the seams are, where certain fabrics are paneled in, and you have to have a very clean sketch and understanding of front, back, side, close-ups of conceptual ideas. Because most of the designs we're building without any physical productions or anything real world to show them. So we kind of have to just be able to show everything cleanly and easy to understand within a vector illustration, so that not only are those ideas easy to understand, but they're easy to share through email, through WebEx, through Miro, or any kind of sharing software that might have any kind of limitations, in order to, get your ideas across without too much confusion.
Thank you. One last question. What are some internship/job opportunities to look out for, whether it's from Under Armour or other companies that you have interacted with, for people who are basically fresh out of college?
Well, I think John is a great resource. I know Under Armour has a summer internship, which the application process, I think, begins in the wintertime. So if you want an internship at any big companies like that, you have to look pretty early in advance for those application windows. So I'd keep an eye out for those. But I think it's good to also keep an eye on the Michigan alumni networks. I haven't needed an internship in a long time, but I do see those alumni newsletters come through. There's certain cities and departments close to me. And I do see a lot of opportunities that if I was in the market, I would be able to make contacts or find particular dates within my area that would be convenient and useful. And again, there are a lot more tools available to you nowadays than when I was in school. So I would say if there's anything that John or the alumni network offers, I would say keep a close eye on those and look as early as possible for the next summer internship, because those processes are pretty long and they start pretty early.
Yeah. Paulina, hi.
Hi. I was just wondering, so I am as a young designer looking for an internship or looking for a job, and I have a lot of other friends in my position. And do you have any advice for dealing with doubt as a designer starting out in the field and dealing with doubt as a designer wanting to establish themselves, but maybe feeling intimidated or just kind of nervous about all of the other competition going on, and how you deal with doubt as an established designer, having been working in your field?
Yeah, I think doubt is just part of the process of a creative. I had a lot of doubt before I got out of school. I think obviously, like everyone else here, I didn't really have an understanding of the industry before I got out of school. I'm not sure I have great advice for it, but I think what I can say is, like, any kind of doubt in your creative process is just part of the process. And it's something you can't let intimidate you too much. Ultimately, I think it's really important in school to figure out what your strengths are and what you're interested in and build toward those. And make sure that you can end up with a portfolio that not only showcases your primary skills, or your interests, but also shows a wide array of skills or abilities. I would say probably one of the main things is learn as many creative programs as you can. I mean, at least for me, Photoshop and Illustrator are the most prominent. We do a lot of organizational work through Microsoft Suite, like Excel and OneNote. I would make sure you know how to work those. I think collaborative programs like Miro is something very prominent, at least in our department. So I'd try to make yourself familiar with that. And I think these days, coding and 3D rendering programs are very good to have under your belt as well. Not only is it good to list, it looks good when you list that on your resume, but I think having those extra skills are very prominent and impressive. And if you don't have the best work on certain programs, I think at least being able to showcase you have a certain level of experience and can grow with those programs, I think is a big advantage that people probably don't necessarily consider. But I would try to not focus on being too intimidated. I would try to focus on yourself and what you're really good at. And if at any point you doubt yourself, I think it's important to remember that everyone feels that, regardless of who they are. What is it? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I think I run into that a lot. I know everyone else runs into that a lot. I think that's just completely normal. And it's something that you can't let get into your head too far. It's just part of the process, and it's not something I think is I think it's worth realizing that once in a while, but not letting it get you down or consume you. We all go through it, and we all have bad weeks or bad bouts, and you're always going to find somebody who's better at you than something. But you just have to use that as a motivator to do what you do best and do that as well as anyone else.
Wow, that's great advice. I will take that advice as well.
We all run into it. I think imposter syndrome is a big thing in our world. So I would try to not focus on that and focus on everything else if possible.
Yeah, if possible. Adam, this has been absolutely wonderful having you today. Thank you so much for giving your time. Is there anything sort of, as a parting words that you would like to share?
Parting words. I loved my time at Michigan. I hope all of you are really enjoying it as well. I would say take full advantage of your 4 years as much as possible, because you'll never get this opportunity to learn as much as you can in as short as a period of time as you can. You'll never be as young and as ambitious as you are now. So this is the time to reach out and grow and learn and experience everything that's available to you in Ann Arbor. It's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful school. you're in the best place in the world, in my opinion. So I would say just take full advantage of it, and focus on enjoying yourselves at Michigan.
Yeah.
It's a great place to be.
For anyone who'd like to follow up with you, be in touch with you, what is the best way to contact you?
I think probably LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to go. That might be a good place for you to look at me and look at my experience. If you ever want to look at anything or have advice on anything particular, or see anything that, you know, maybe gives you any insight or inspiration. But I message through LinkedIn all the time. So that might be the easiest place to hit me up, and I check it often. So I'd be able to get back to you.
If anybody needs help connecting with Adam on LinkedIn, just let me know. I can help you with that. So once again, Adam, thank you so much for being with us, for your time, for your advice. It has been just really great to have you today.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for the questions. And go blue. Thanks, everyone.